guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm filming a Q&A for all the questions that were submitted on Instagram. There's a ton of questions and information that I'm going to go through, so get cozy and let's dive into it. Okay, so the first question is a timeline of your journey and things you did at each stage. So this deserves its own video because it would be so long. So I will create a separate video of kind of like the timeline and journey that I took to heal each symptom that I had and kind of just the process that I took. But in a very short description, I started out with comprehensive lab testing that really kind of helped me just understand what was going on inside my body. I looked at my gut health, my hormones, my thyroid, metabolic health with blood work. I started with the gut, I kind of optimized my hormones and then really worked on my metabolism. Throughout my entire journey, I was really working on all of those things at the same time because your body is so connected. As you're working on your gut, you're going to improve your hormones and your thyroid. So really it all goes together, but that's kind of how I broke it up. But really getting started with the labs was the essential first step because everyone's bodies are very unique and your needs are going to be slightly different than mine, but that is what I did. But again, I'll create a separate video kind of walking through each phase of my healing journey so that you can kind of see the specific details. Question number 2 is, how do I find the root cause of my bloated belly and water retention? How did I? Again, that goes back to lab testing. I had no idea what was going on until I finally started getting some actual specific data on what was going on inside my body, looking at my hormones, my cortisol levels, and then also doing comprehensive gut microbiome testing. Those are really the two biggest solutions of discovering why I was struggling with the bloating, water retention, and inflammation. Cortisol, when it is really high, it makes you retain a lot of sodium, so you become puffy, watery, and bloated. For gut-specific distension, like that hard rock belly bloated feeling, that comes more from gut bacterial issues. Cortisol can cause a lot of those gut issues, so it's kind of all connected, but in general, gut testing and hormone testing helped me discover the root cause of those specific symptoms. The second follow-up question to that somebody asked is, healthcare in my country sucks and doctors won't test their patients properly. So that is unfortunately a huge issue that a lot of women especially run into. We're gaslit and told that, you know, this is just part of being a woman, you're going to be fine, just go on birth control. That was a lot of what I received as a patient, struggling with so many symptoms, and it's really unfortunate that that is the standard of care. So you really have to look outside the sick care system, and unfortunately a lot of that is paid out of pocket, but would do it 10 times over because if I was still struggling as I was years ago, I would be very frustrated because I went to so many traditional medicine doctors and that's all that I heard was everything looks fine, you know, work out more, eat less, and I was already doing all those things. So you really have to get outside that system to find help for those symptoms that you might be struggling with. The next question is, should you start with gut testing, Dutch testing, or blood work? And I really recommend all of it, to be honest with you. It depends on the specific symptoms you have or the concerns that you might be dealing with. You might benefit more so from one than the other, but honestly, working with thousands of women at this point, I highly recommend those 3 tests, and that's what I include in my one-on-one intensive program. For that specific reason, most people are gonna benefit from looking at all of those areas. You know, you might need something a little bit more so than the other, just depending on your symptoms. The next question is, do you have any advice for newly diagnosed hypothyroidism? This is a great question. I would recommend really focusing on stress, nutrition, gut health, balancing your blood sugars. So the thyroid is really reactive to its environment. If you have poor gut health, slow liver function, living in a high stress state, it oftentimes causes the thyroid to be suppressed. So that might show up as hypothyroidism, or you might have an immune system issue. So I would also look at the immune system. TPO antibodies is really helpful to test for, and a lot of primary care providers will not test for that. So look at TPO antibodies. analyze your stress. Are you living in a high stress cortisol state? Support liver function, that might look like supplementing with milk thistle, certain vitamins and minerals. Glutathione is really great to support liver. I would also supplement with selenium, zinc. Tyrosine can be really helpful to support thyroid function. Follow a gluten-free diet, that can be really beneficial for hypothyroid cases. Focus on a high protein, high fiber diet to support gut health. You might need to supplement with probiotics, prebiotics, digestive enzymes to help improve gut health. But all of those things should put you in a really great place if you just got diagnosed with hypothyroidism, which is really common with women, again, because it's such a stress-based issue. The next question is, did you stop exercising initially on your journey and would you recommend it? So this is going to be super case dependent. For myself and my story, my journey, I was working out 6 to 7 days a week very intensely, and that led to so many issues that I experienced with my hormones, my gut health, and my thyroid. And I actually lost my cycle for many years, so I definitely would recommend it the specific person in case that might need it. So if you have missing cycles, if your cycle is super irregular, if you're doing a ton of exercise and you're dealing with bloating and inflammation, you might benefit from taking some time away from exercise completely. I took about 2 months off of exercising at all, and I really just focused on walking and yoga. And then I slowly started reintroducing exercise when I felt like my body could handle it. And the form of exercise that I focused on when I did my reintroduction was more Pilates, bar, but also a little bit of strength training. Really 3 times a week max. Now that I'm years into having a regular cycle, I weight train mostly, but I also walk and do really a mixture of everything that keeps my body and my mind happy. So I like to mix it up. I don't like to do the same workout all the time, but I do love strength training for the muscle building benefits and just providing my body with the best support of exercise. But it looks totally different than what I used to do. I used to do like minimal rest time between my sets that I would do for weightlifting. Now I take plenty of rest time. I'm not like pushing myself to the max, so it actually feels good. The next question is tips for insulin resistance. So if you are someone who's struggling with insulin resistance, obviously starting with testing is really important. Looking at your insulin A1C glucose is really important to analyze if you do have insulin resistance. This is where your body starts not signaling insulin and glucose properly. You can end up with really high glucose levels or just dysregulated blood sugar, which leads to a lot of weight issues and hormone imbalances. I recommend tracking your glucose with a continuous glucose monitor, or you can buy an inexpensive finger prick monitor on Amazon. That's a really inexpensive way to see how your body is responding to nutrition and carbohydrates specifically. Looking at your post-meal glucose is really essential. You want to aim to be around 80 to 89, below 90 is ideal. Focusing on a fiber-rich diet, apple cider vinegar before your meals, walking after your meals to help with glucose sensitivity, berberine, chromium, gymnema, bitter melon, those are all really glucose sensitizing herbs. Alpha lipolic acid is also really great to supplement with. And then again, focusing on protein, fiber, lifting weights really consistently, building as much muscle tissue as possible is really helpful for insulin resistance. So those are just a few really simple tips that I would focus on first. If your glucose is still really high after doing all of those things, I would look at cortisol, and then I would also look for a lower carb diet, potentially for a little bit, just to help manage glucose a little bit better. But lift weights, move your body, sleep, manage stress, supplement if you need to, apple cider vinegar, walking after meals, lots of fiber, that's all gonna be beneficial for helping with that insulin resistance. Somebody asked, how did you know you needed to be gluten-free? Was my marker on my GI map high for gluten sensitivity? Yes, it was. Effects of gluten on the immune system. If you have Hashimoto's, which is thyroid autoimmunity, which I do have. So I knew that I needed to be gluten-free, and honestly, it made a huge difference in my journey. As soon as I started going gluten-free and being really strict with it, I lost a lot of inflammation. I had more energy. I didn't struggle with as much brain fog. And from lab testing, I actually saw changes significantly in my antibody levels when I actually did go gluten-free. So the clinical research supports it, and I did a little test trial on myself, and it really does make a huge impact. So yes, it was positive on my GI map for sensitivity, but also just the research shows that following a gluten-free diet is beneficial if you do have Hashimoto's or antibodies present or thyroid autoimmunity. So there actually were a couple of questions about fasting. Is it good for your gut? Some people say to eat protein when you wake up. Some people say to intermittent fast. And my answer to this is it really depends on the situation. I'm not a huge fan of fasting for women because most women are not eating enough in the first place, and then they just throw in fasting, and fasting is a stressor to the body. It can be a really helpful tool, but if you're not eating enough in the first place, if you have irregular cycles and hormone-related issues, I recommend focusing on those first before thinking about adding in fasting. But it really depends on your labs. Again, you wanna look at your cortisol levels, you wanna look at your hormones, you wanna look at your insulin and see if it's going to be a good tool for you. Someone who struggles with high cortisol levels, low hormones, and your insulin is not high, you probably won't benefit from fasting, and it might do more harm than good. So again, it's very case specific and just depends on kind of the situation. If you're eating enough in the first place, that's really gonna determine if fasting is going to be a good tool. If you're already eating 1,300 calories, working out all the time, and you're not losing weight, you're struggling with all these symptoms, just adding in fasting is not going to solve all your problems. It really takes that personalized approach to knowing if fasting's good or not. But yes, it is a really good, incredible tool. It just needs to be used correctly in the right situation. And again, that's just very case specific. A good example of fasting being used in a correct way, you're eating enough, you're dealing with insulin resistance, so your insulin is really high. Maybe you have an insulin of 12, 13, 20, then I would use fasting as a tool. Okay, the next question is, what are your go-to supplements to help with bloating, hormone imbalance, etc.? Supplements are super specific, and the internet can make supplementation really overwhelming. So I just recommend starting with the foundations: omega fatty acids, a good multivitamin, magnesium, vitamin D, and possibly a probiotic. Some people won't respond well to just adding in probiotics, so that one is a little bit of a question mark. But just start with the foundations and then kind of go from there based on lab testing. I like to be super specific when making supplement recommendations based on labs, because every supplement out there sounds like it can be a good option to include in your routine, but then it just becomes super overwhelming. So I do recommend being super specific based on whatever your body needs. But those kind of core four, omega fatty acids, multivitamin, vitamin D, magnesium, those will really hit kind of all of your foundational needs. And then from there, just be super specific on what your body specifically might need. This is a great question. Where did you even start? So I actually get this question a lot, and I definitely, after spending tons of money on random supplements, courses, I worked with naturopathic doctors in person. I literally did everything, and I recommend starting with lab testing. Get all the comprehensive labs that you can. It's definitely an investment because traditional medicine does not cover the type of testing that will actually give you answers. So I recommend finding a functional provider like myself or whoever to get all the labs done to really understand what your body truly needs. There's a lot of supplements out there, there's a lot of different things, and you're just gonna end up wasting a lot of time and money. So just dive into the labs, because your body might need something completely different than what someone is pushing on social media. Get the labs, understand what your body needs, and then kind of go from there. This is a just kind of general question, but adrenal fatigue symptoms and tips. So adrenal fatigue is where your cortisol levels are pretty low from years of stress, high stress. Your body ends up kind of trying to compensate with a high stress output, but it kind of no longer can't. So it just ends up with really low cortisol levels. That is known as adrenal fatigue. And just as it sounds, you will be chronically fatigued, have brain fog, feel like it's really hard to almost just do daily activities. You might struggle with weight gain, bloating, inflammation, but overall your energy levels and motivation is just gonna be really low. Your body's just gonna feel really depleted is probably the best way to describe it. You still want to practice stress management. You don't want to like increase cortisol through intense exercise or anything like that. You still want to focus on low impact movement, nourishing your body, but focus on supplementing with high doses of vitamin C, B vitamins, minerals. Glandular therapy can be really helpful, so specific supplements to really help nourish those adrenal glands is kind of the way out. There are specific adaptogens that are helpful for increasing cortisol or creating more energy versus kind of chilling you out. Rhodiola, ginseng, those are two really good ones, but that's just kind of supplementation. And then again, sleep, the foundations, low impact movement, that is really what you want to focus on. Spend time in nature, all of that's going to be really great for adrenal fatigue. And then also addressing any other chronic infections, gut issues, viral infections, etc., because that can also deplete cortisol. Okay, this is a really common question that I get. How long from the start of your health journey to now? So I really started struggling with my health probably 8 to 9 years ago. I have been symptom-free for about 3 to 4 years now probably. So my health journey in total was probably 4 to 5 years long. But I did all the wrong things first. So I went to a ton of traditional medicine doctors first. I tried all the supplements, all the courses, just random things that I saw on the internet. That's like the core of what I was doing for the first 1 to 2 years of my healing journey. And then I finally got on a good track of seeing good results, really understanding my labs, and getting into all the healthy habits that were actually going to support my body and my goals. So again, it was like 4 to 5 years of healing, but really half of that was spent kind of doing the wrong things. And I've really developed through my experience, my methodology of, you know, how to get really great results, really with any condition, but definitely specifically hormone, gut health, and thyroid related issues. And now I work with women and again have developed kind of the journey of wellness to get people really great results. So that is the timeline from start to finish. But I did all the wrong things first, so that you don't have to. This is a great question. What change did I make first? Feeling overwhelmed. So I get this question a lot, and if you're just starting your healing journey, I highly recommend getting lab testing done because social media is full of information and it's really hard to filter through what is actually applicable to you versus what's just information overload. And everyone really has their own unique needs based on their hormones, their metabolic health, their health history, and also just working with so many women and seeing many different types of cases. There is no one size fits all. You can't apply my story or the specific steps that I took to your journey because you might require very different things than I do or did. So that's where the lab testing, like if you're feeling overwhelmed, there's no better place to start than getting actual data for what your body needs. And unfortunately, traditional medicine just doesn't support the type of testing that's probably going to give you the answers that you're looking for. But that's why resources like myself and other functional providers out there, you know, do what we do, because it's really helpful for a lot of women and men to just finally get some answers and direction for what they need instead of feeling confused, frustrated, and overwhelmed by social media or just random information on the internet. This is a really good question. Did you do all of the things you're currently doing at the start of your journey? How did it evolve? Definitely not. All of the habits that I do currently, I definitely wasn't incorporating at the start of my journey. At the very beginning, again, it was really just about understanding what was going on inside my body after being told that all of my labs were normal for so long. And I obviously discovered that my body was in this chronic state of fight or flight. I was under eating, over exercising, and it was really causing this cascade of issues within my body. So that was really where I put my focus first, was slowing down my workouts, focusing on nourishing myself a little bit more, just slowing down in life overall, prioritizing sleep, recovery. So I was just really more foundational in the beginning, you know, started feeling better, less symptoms, added more things into my wellness routine. I was also a college student at the kind of beginning of my healing journey. So I didn't have a ton of money to spend on red light therapy. I didn't have any money to spend on those extra things. So I just focused on, you know, the foundations, and I saw really great results with just doing that. Now I, you know, have invested in red light therapy, sauna, cold plunge, some of those other fancier things, and they are definitely super helpful, but you definitely don't need them to get really great results. So, and I always put that emphasis on my clients as well, because again, social media can be very overwhelming with feeling like you have to add all those things into your wellness routine, but I would say that they're helpful, but definitely not necessary to get good results. So that's kind of how I started and where I'm at now. There was another question about how to maintain being so lean, and then I also had another question in this category about my cycle. Do I have a regular cycle? Yes, I have a regular 28 to 30 day cycle every single month, and it's very normal average. So I do still have a cycle. I eat about 1900 to 2000 calories. That's kind of where I maintain right now. I do track macros probably about 80 to 90% of the time. If I'm traveling, I'm not tracking macros, but on my day-to-day, usually I am tracking to make sure that I'm eating enough protein, carbs, fat, etc. I eat about 30% protein, 40% carb, 30% fat, and then 20 to 30 grams of fiber every single day. I try to hover around that, again, about 80 to 90% of the time. And then really just having intuitive eating approach around travel. So that's kind of what I do for nutrition currently. I work out probably 5 days a week, lifting weights, 50 minutes. I go on daily walks, and that's pretty much it. Sometimes I'll filter in a group fitness class if I have a friend that like wants to work out, or if I'm traveling, I'll usually do like a class. Pilates, I try to do at home maybe once or twice a week. So a little bit of mix of everything, but mostly my own programming for workouts, weight training most of the time. I probably sit about 19 to 20% body fat. I do have a good amount of muscle, but that's kind of just a tidbit. I do have a regular cycle though. Those are kind of my main tips for maintaining leanness or muscle mass. So that's what I recommend and what I currently do. I think also going off of that question with how to maintain being lean, I used to stress so much about eating out and just have like a super rigid routine around exercise, nutrition, and I just used to have really restrictive habits around wellness, and it caused me to have a really bad relationship with myself, my body. And I know a lot of women experience this as well. Social media sometimes is not very helpful for this. Definitely in the beginning of my journey when I was dealing with a lot of active issues, I was more rigid about my wellness routine, but I think adopting that balanced approach from the start is really important because I know firsthand how it really affected me. Okay, there were quite a few questions about reverse dieting and carb cycling, so I'm just gonna talk about nutrition for a second. So when I first started my healing journey and kind of did all the lab testing, I discovered that I was chronically under eating, especially for how much I was working out. and I would try to go into caloric deficits and it would just make me feel super puffy, bloated. I was dealing with chronic insomnia because my body was just in this fight or flight state, and it was not getting the right amount of fuel, which was causing a whole nother slew of issues. But a lot of women struggle with this. On top of that, I was not having a regular cycle. So at the start of my healing journey, I did a reverse diet for quite a while, probably like 6 to 8 months. And I actually did lose a lot of inflammation. I don't remember specifically like weight wise how much I lost, but I definitely saw really good results from increasing my food intake overall. I did that for 6 to 8 months, kind of fed my metabolism up. And then from there, I started tracking blood sugars and going into more specific gut protocols. And that's where I added in some carb cycling techniques to help with gut issues, but also blood sugar dysregulation. So that's basically where you go lower carb a few days out of the week and then add in higher carbs a few days following. It's just a different nutritional strategy. Some people definitely benefit from it, but that's kind of what I did. 6 to 8 months of feeding up. Then I kind of did some carb cycling, and then I went back to sort of my maintenance. I did do kind of like a deficit period after that, but more or less fed up for a while, then started going through different specific nutritional strategies based on my lab results. I hope this Q&A was super helpful and you got something out of it. Comment below if you have any other specific questions for me or just wellness topics that you're curious about. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.